Hey, we're back with another lick of the week. This is July 21st, Monday, and I think I've covered quite a few one-chord licks, and by one I'm referring to the key that you're in. You'll hear this term a lot sometimes in music theory, 1-4-5 chord progression. And if you think about the key of G, which we're talking about primarily in this series right now, G, C, and D are your three common chord changes, and they relate to chords that sound good with the scale that you're dealing with. So C, G, and D chords, major chords, sound good for songs like typical three-chord bluegrass tunes. And if you move that to another key, the 1-4-5 idea is universal to all the keys. So if you're playing in the key of C, it would be C, F, and G would be your 1-4-5. So primarily the licks I've covered so far in melodic style have dealt with the one chord or the key that you're in. So G for G, major, right? Well, the next most common chord change that you'll hear in simple three-chord songs in the key of G will be C major. So that's your 4 chord. If you look at a G major scale, you'll see that represented as a C note. That represents also a C chord that you'll play for your rhythm. So what I want to do now is for C licks, move over to the 4 chord ideas, and we need to kind of mess with the C major scale just a little bit to get you ready to play these licks. So I'm going to start with the mode of the C major scale, which means I'm going to start out of order. I'm not going to start with the C note because I don't have a low C note on the banjo in G tuning. The lowest note I have in a C scale is this note, D. So what I'm going to do is start on the second mode of a C major scale, which just means starting out of order. I'm going to start on the second note of a C major scale. And if you're not familiar with C major scale, I'm going to read up on this. There's plenty of places to check up on this, but I'm going to start with the second mode, which is called the Dorian mode. Big theory term, but it's just the second note of a C scale. Since I don't have the low C, I'll have to go as low as I can because I want to make use of the entire fingerboard if I can for these licks. So I'm going to start with D, which is the second note. D, E, F. Now we're going melodic here. G is open. A, 7th fret of the 4th. B is open. And C is the 5th fret of the 3rd string. So I could call that my Dorian mode. And I can play some pretty cool licks, but it doesn't give me the full range of tones that I need to play some of the licks that you hear in bluegrass. So let me go a little further. When I get to the end of this mode, I'll be back to a C, right? So now I don't have to play a mode again because I have a C note to start with, so I can play the full scale, not a mode. So the first scale for C will be a mode because that's the lowest note that I can find in the scale. But once I get here, I can continue on with D as being my 1st string, E here, 5th fret, 2nd string. Here's my F on the 1st string, 3rd fret. G is open 5th. I go to this position that we've already used in the G scale. We're going to reuse this position. Here's your A. Here's your B. Here's the C, 5th string, 10th fret with the thumb. So if I run these together, I'll have the 1st C scale as a mode. And then when I get to the end, I'm going to conjoin that with the full C scale going up an octave higher. So that gives me a pretty broad range of the fingerboard. Now, I know there's other places, other pathways to find some of these notes, but I'm going to stick with this pathway because these are the notes that you'll use the most when you play these melodic licks, especially in this area of the neck, which is where I'm going to stay for a couple of weeks anyway. So it would be a good idea if you could practice the C scale going up and back to get you really familiar with the fingering, how to transition from one position to the next, and for the right hand, of course, for the melodic style, which is a little different than Scruggs. You use different fingers on different strings. All right, now having played just the scale for a while, now you're ready to tackle some C licks, 4-chord licks. And it's really easy to do once you practice the scale, because melodic scale, like I've said before, is predicated on you being really fluid and familiar with major scales in the beginning, and then you can get in more advanced stuff. So G, C, and D scales are really important for G, C, and D melodic licks. Duh. So now that we've played the scale a little bit, let me show you some really cool ideas that you can use that are based on the exact same notes that you practice for the scale. And of course we can mess with these notes, add or take away as many notes as we need, break the scale up into fragments, right, so that we can come up with cool ideas and we can improvise with this stuff. So the scale can start and stop anywhere you want. For right now, for this week, I'm not going to use these higher register notes, the last A, B, C note. I'm going to stay in this area because there are a ton of great melodic licks for C, or for the 4-chord, that revolve around the 5th fret. You don't have to go very far to play some really cool sounding C scale licks. Alright, so I'll take this and I'm going to stop with the G note on the 5th string open for these next few licks. This will be the highest note in the register. Here's the lick that I'm going to start you with. And it's going to start with the F note on the 1st string out of this scale fragment. Let me get this finger out of the way so you can see it. 1, 2, 1. 1, 2, 1. So that's the first fragment. 1, 2, 1. Now the next fragment is going to be a C note, 5th fret of the 3rd string, open B, open D. So you can actually do a forward roll here, which is really nice. So, and these are all notes of the C scale. So by staying in this position and by learning the C major scale notes that cover this area of the fingerboard, you've already trained yourself to hear and find these notes. The next thing you have to do is learn how to reconfigure the notes. So we have 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. And I'm going to resolve this, or I'm going to play a C major chord so that your ear can find out or can feel its way to where this is going. Alright. Now, that's pretty easy. Let's add a twist to that and make it just a little longer and use more of the scale notes. Same pattern in the beginning. 1, 2, 1, 3, 2. But now we're going to alter the pathway. Instead of going to the open first, 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 4, 4th string, that A note, open G. 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 2, open. So I can still resolve it, but it just takes longer to play it. So I can take these 2 fragments and play them as they're being played now, or I can stretch them out and make them last longer. So that will be our starting point for the 4-chord licks, or C major licks. So practice your C major scale and then mess around with these 2 licks here, and then we'll get more in depth with the C licks. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks.